Well, Jose has asked me uh, to have a conversation about publications, articles in journals and books and stuff, drawing from my experience, both as a writer myself, but also as an editor-in-chief of maritime studies, which I've been for 20 years, and also a co-editor of the model series on Springer. So I have experience from different forms of publications, um, also as a writer myself. I am a sociologist, and I've been working on marine issues and fisheries for for all my career, which is now coming to an end, I guess, since I have been retired for many years now. Yes.
Well, thank you, Svein. Svein Jentoft is a very well-known researcher in this field. I am Jose Pascual. I am a professor of social anthropology at the University of La Laguna in Tenerife, Spain. And I've been working with maritime issues, with fisheries and marine protected areas and other topics also for several decades. I remember when I began in this field, I was reading Spain and Bonnie and James Acheson and Ivan Breton and some of these top authors at the moment in the 80s. And it has been a pleasure to collaborate later with some of these authors that I was reading when I was preparing
Hmm.
my PhD. We have been asked to comment on the issue of the differences in publication between journal articles and book chapters. And this is something that has evolved strongly in the last decades. When we began to do research and publish in these fields, the difference were more relevant that the difference are nowadays. I can share some slides briefly to explain some of these issues. For instance, metrics development has had a very relevant role to explain how the publication have evolved. For instance, metrics on scientific publications, and especially from journal articles, have had a very strong role in the changes. First, these metrics were developed on journal articles and basically on journal articles in hard science, published only in journal. These metrics, like Web of Science and later Scopus and so on, have created a way of evaluation and science that was previously non-existent. These metrics began to be applied first to hard science, to physics, maths, and medicine, and so on, but later were applied to social science. And of course, they do not work equally, because when we began to develop research and publish, books and book chapters were the core of the publication of most of us. Today, some metrics apply to both journal and book chapters, like Google Scholar. And increasingly, some book are integrated into the more traditional metrics like Web of Science. Some publishers are integrated in the indexing of some of the Web of Science database. It's difficult to know how metrics will evolve, but very probably metrics on books and book chapters will be further developed in the coming years. Going more specifically into the issue of book chapters versus journal articles, perhaps we can say that both are increasingly similar because in top publishers for books and are asking for similar requirements for the book chapters that were usual for journal articles. Svein, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, there is no question that things have changed in recent years, and they will continue to change. Not only will book chapters and journal articles become more and more similar in their design, but also you will see we have seen a development where the social science literature becomes like the natural science literature. We are using journal article publications more like the natural sciences always did. And that means that our traditional way of publishing in terms of books and monographs, etc., have lost its ground, in at least some of it in social science. But still, people publish books, monographs, and we also continue to publish in edited volumes. But the design of the individual article has become more like how you would do it as a journal article. And the books, at least those that we publish on the Mare series, which is a Springer outcome, looks more and more like a special issue in a journal in the way they are designed. So things are happening and changing, and they are changing fast. All these things that we talk about now didn't exist when I started out. There was no internet, and you couldn't write papers as you can do today. Now you can sit together and write the paper, even if your location is in different parts of the world. I remember when I started I was living in the US at that time, and I was co-authoring a paper with a colleague here in Norway, and we were sending drafts across the Atlantic, back and forth. So this is how we wrote together, and this was, of course, a slow process, a very different process. But the outcome, the substance, what we finally published, wasn't so much different than how we do it today. So many of these things hasn't changed the very substance of how we argue and how we write and how we analyze our data or actually write the basic substance of what we do is mainly the same and should remain the same. So, but you have to pay more and more attention to the new situation that we are in, especially if you are a young researcher and we're there to build a career. Now It doesn't matter. It doesn't only matter what you publish, but where you published. That was never an issue when I when I started out. And and if you apply for a job, the employer would look where you have published and perhaps not care so much about what you have published. They assume that if you have published in a good journal, the substance or the content of the article is okay, so they don't check that. They trust the system, and that is in many ways a peculiar situation.
Yes. Yes, it's relevant also the comparison between the book chapters and articles in an edited
Mm,
uh, in a special issue in a journal.
mm,
Somehow these two scenarios are increasingly similar, but even in that case, uh, the role of the editors used to be stronger in the case of the books, to my, at least in my experience.
mm, mm,
Usually, the editors of the books might have a stronger role defining some of the issues, providing advice, and sometimes guiding the book chapters authors in the development of the chapters.
mm,
Your experience about this is similar, is the same as well?
mm. Well, uh, I have been editor of special issues, and I now have a uh, a book chapter coming out in the edited volume by a person. And the editor of that book, what he does and what I did when I edited the special issue isn't very different. So it varies from situation to situation. But if you're talking about an ordinary individual article in a journal, the editor is more detached. The editor has no um, opinion on what you write. As long as it's good quality, and is within the topic of the journal. But it doesn't. He's not. He doesn't look at the paper as part of a collection in the same way as a book editor would do, or a special issue editor would do.
Yes, well, in my experience, it has varied a lot,
Mm,
depending on the special issues or the books.
mm,
For instance, the book that we published about the small-scale fisheries in Europe was very different to anything that we have developed before, because we have the editors propose a structure for the development of each chapter, and try to keep the authors stick to that template for the development of the chapter. So it was somehow a very special book.
mm,
Because it was more strongly integrated than usual for the
mm.
for,
Yeah.
for, for the books, because that
Mm,
is special template.
yeah.
In special issues, my experience is that the editors are not so much don't have so much role in guiding somehow the development
Mm,
of the articles.
mm,
But that can vary a lot on the specific cases.
mm.
In both
Some-
both
mm,
journal articles and book chapters used to pass, especially in in relevant publishers, through peer review. And
mm,
usually the system of peer review is similar.
mm. Yeah.
Perhaps the role of the editors in the peer review in the book chapters might be stronger, for selecting the reviewers, or you don't think so?
Mm. Yeah, it may be even more cumbersome. When these books I have edited, I have or we have first edited the individual chapter contributions to check whether they are within the topic of and the perspective of the book, because the book is part of the project. And then we have sent it out for external reviews. But and that might also be how you would do it as a special issue um, uh, editor. But as a journal editor, who receives individual papers, and the papers is not part of a project, research project, um, just an individual contribution. The editor takes a more detached role and rely more about on the external reviews.
Yes, yeah. In the last years, book publishers have insisted that book chapters need to be independent from
Yeah.
the can be detached from from the book, because they usually sell can sell the individual
Yeah.
book chapters on their own. So this
Mm.
makes a change in how the books are distributed. When we began publishing books, this possibility to detach the book chapter from the book was impossible, because there were only hard copies of the book. The
Mm.
PDF didn't exist. Now the development of the PDF and the possibility to detach the chapter from the book is increasingly relevant, and this makes. Do you think that this makes the books less integrated somehow, or not the same?
Well, that is a possibility, but it all depends on the editor of the book, whether he or she allows this, It is a challenge because, for instance, you wouldn't, um, let's say, as the editor of the book, you wouldn't necessarily want the individual chapters to present the analytical perspective. Everyone does that. Then it becomes boring. Everyone does the same, and you try to avoid that, and that is something you think about as an editor of the book. Um, but but there is a you have to take into consideration that the chapters are individually downloadable, and this is how we do it in the Mata series, and this is what happened with your book. People would download those chapters that they are interested in, just like they do with special issues articles. They wouldn't necessarily download the whole special issue, though. Now they can download individual papers. But that has a consequence, of course, how what the article should contain terms of in terms of information. There should, be an abstract. There should be keywords. There should be affiliation and all that stuff, and that should be on the first first page. But the rest of the rest of the paper, rest of the book chapter would be the same as well, no differences, I would say, from how a book chapter usually look like. I don't hear you now. You
Yes.
lost you.
Svein, what do you
Yeah.
think would be the advice to young scholars?
Sorry.
What do you think will be the best advice for young scholar beginning their career about
Mm.
combining journal articles and book chapters or books in their career?
Mm.
What do you
Well,
think is
the dilemma where to publish in a book or a journal becomes less, uh, if we're talking about how or comparing how books used to look like. um, I think for a young scholar starting out in the career, the journal articles counts more, and and uh, because they are easier to find, and there is also some prestige element, and all these metrics that you're talking about have traditionally valued journal articles more. If you go to Google Scholar these days and I look at what have they noticed or listed, it's basically my journal articles and not my books. And when I see what people are referring to when they refer to my work, they are referring to my journal articles and not to my books. And the book chapters that I have in books are less noticed, I guess. But then the question is also how 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 are articles or book chapters noticed? And I think it is equally as common to notice them in the reference list of of other papers and written by other people. Just they they uh, they refer to something that catches your interest, and that's how you identify uh, these books and articles that you end up reading and referring to, not directly. I cannot think that I doubt that there are many um, readers of maritime studies that reads every issue that we publish from beginning to end in order to they are curious to, there might be there something that is relevant for them. I think they often go via other um, articles and authors.
yes, it's relevant to think about also on the impact of the books and book chapters on the not on academia but in other sectors.
Mm,
Sometimes a book might have a stronger impact outside the academia than a book chapter, than a journal article. Uh,
that
that
is true.
that's
That
what
is,
that's what we have experienced with our book about small scale fisheries in Europe. It has been used for instance in different instances of the at European level because it provides a comprehensive overview of what is happening in Europe in this field. And this is something to think about because
mm,
our impact on society is not only through academia, maybe also on other through other means, and this is something that is increasingly taking into account the metrics. This is something the metrics are taking into account increasingly, the new
mm.
metrics.
Yeah,
So,
that's interesting. Yeah.
see, so it's something to think about because we know how metrics have evolved in the last 40 years, but we don't know how they will evolve in the next 40 years.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
at the end, I think we need to think on on how to reach a wider audience with our publication and be consistent with the central idea of that our publication need to cope with gaps in
mhm,
knowledge. We need to work on things that are not well covered by the academia and try to develop innovative research. And where to publish this is something to think about. I think that combining journal articles and books or book chapters is a wise
Yeah,
strategy.
yeah,
And we cannot cope only we cannot only publish journal articles or book chapters. We need to do both,
yeah.
and both have some complementary roles, because the integration of the books is difficult to achieve in most of the even in most of the journals, even in the special issues. I think my feeling is that integrating in the level of integration of books are stronger than the level of integration on special issues, and that's something that might be
Mm.
relevant to think about.
Yeah, personally, I didn't care. I was happy to get published, and I knew that in the news system, on internet, etc., people will find uh, the article, when they start to search on keywords, topics, etc. So it wasn't so important where I published as long as it was published. So I was never, concerned with with publishing in books and articles. The difference is, of course, that when you publish in books, in edited volumes, you are invited. The editor contacts you and wants your contribution. But this is not how journals operate in most of the time. Even if there are announcement, calls for contributions, but they are not directly um, directed to you personally. And if a book editor, a person who is planning to edit a book on a certain topic, and he or she invites me to write a paper to contribute to it, I'm happy to do that, and I don't think about that I should say no and send something to a journal instead. When I have written something that is not part of, it's not does not result from an invitation, and I do that. So I think we need to be flexible and use the opportunities we have to come out with our work. And with the internet and all this, the access to what you publish is much more easy than it used to be.
Definitely. And some of our chapters are also well cited,
Mm,
even surprisingly. So I think book chapters can be very relevant for the career development in social science. So it's something
mm,
to take into account for young scholars.
yeah,
And I think we have covered most of the issues, Spain.
yeah,
Thank you for joining
yeah,
this
yeah.
this this conversation. As usual, it has been very very interesting to talk about this issue.
Mm.
If you want to comment something to finish.
No, I think um, it's important to publish, and you know the reason we do our work is that we want to communicate with the world in a way, and there are different ways of doing it, and the traditional academic article or book chapter is not the only way. There is also a lot of magazines out there, where you publish essays, and they are, of course, a different kind of publishing, and the content and the design of the article will be different, even if it draws on your work. So I think we should also use that opportunity. There is also newspapers, of course, and we should use every opportunity we have to get our work out and become known and used. Sometimes newspaper articles, chronicles are more effective than the academic articles.
And in the last year, also some social networks have also an impact to
Yeah.
disseminate some of the knowledge and make it more to get a wider audience. So these are the challenges we are facing today.
Mm.
But I hope this conversation might help some of the audience to know a
Mm.
bit better the scenario that we have about publishing nowadays. Thank you, Svein.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose.
Bye. See you.
Bye bye. Mm.